Mr. Kirby, thanks a lot for agreeing to do this interview. In our series, Inside the Classroom, some teachers recounted stories of being in a class with people who had ADHD, people who had autism, people who had oppositional defiance disorder, and a number of other special needs. What's your sense of how inclusive education is working in our province?
Well, I spent 4 years in opposition decrying inclusive education, pointing out its shortcomings, so I won't be somebody to say that it's all working fine. I've been in about a couple of dozen schools since the new year alone, and I see examples when I go around talking to teachers and visiting classrooms of where the inclusive education model is not working as intended. So we have to address that, and that's why we've struck a task force with educational experts who are going around the province doing consultations, also looking at practices in other provinces to try to get a sense of...
It's more about outcomes though, isn't it, that task force?
Well, I think that the inclusive education model is having a significant impact on outcomes. And they're specifically mandated to look at inclusive education as well as mathematics, literacy, multicultural education, Indigenous education, teacher professional development and training, as well as early learning. So that's what their mandate is. So inclusive education is specifically in there. Because let's face it, we didn't get into this situation overnight, and we're not going to get out of it quickly either. I think that we need, and not to prejudge the outcome of those, that the work the task force is doing, but based on what I've seen firsthand, we need to change the way that we're mobilizing our resources and providing resources to schools in order to serve students better.
It sounds to me as though what you just said was that you think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that in some instances inclusive education is having a negative effect on outcomes. Have I got that right?
I would say that if you look at student outcomes in our schools, children are not being best served by this model right now. It is not working as it was intended to work. And we have to make adjustments because if we don't, we'll be failing our children, in my opinion.
Since you've been minister, there's been an increase in classroom sizes, and some of that, actually all of that, was because of the economic situation that we were in. Logically, that means there must be more students proportionately with special needs in those classrooms. So while you might be concerned about outcomes, doesn't it follow that you're putting a lot of pressure on teachers? I mean, how is a teacher supposed to teach students with special needs in the same classroom with students without special needs in an effective manner when those classes are getting bigger?
Sure. I mean, first of all, we've been very upfront from the beginning that larger class size means more work for teachers. There's no doubt about that. You have more children to teach, you have more work to do. There's no question about it. We have not reduced the ratios, the allocation for special education teachers, instructional resource teachers. There were no reductions in other specialist positions, so those who work with children with special needs, speech language pathology, educational psychologists, and so on. So none of that has been reduced as a result of the budget last year. The little that we were able to do last year to add was to add an additional 27 special education teaching positions, so instructional resource teacher positions. That those were positions that would have otherwise went away due to declining student population. We also added more than 100 hours of additional student assistant time. So we did do some minor things last year, and I hope that we might be able to do more this year.
Do you think that kept up with the increase in classroom size?
Absolutely not. Yeah. Oh, there's no question about it.
So what about bullying of teachers? We had one teacher tell us she was assaulted by a student, it was a special needs student. She was seriously injured, had to take time off work. Again, coming back to the safety in the classroom, how could an educator be in a position where that could happen? What kind of assessment is done?
Well, it's disturbing that that would happen at all, but it does happen in our schools. I understand from the NLTA survey that they did that was associated with the Joint Committee on Inclusion, that there was something like 1% of teachers who actually experienced that physical violence, and that's 1% too many. So again, we have ways of addressing this. The school district and schools administrators are challenged by having to balance the notion that children are included in school. So I have, for example, parents come to me and say, my child has a particular special need or an exceptionality, if you will, and I want my child to be in school. Then we have teachers who are concerned about their personal safety and don't want to get in a situation where they have physical violence meted out against them. We have administrators who are trying to balance this. We have the school district, which is trying to make peace and make sure no one is hurt, yet children are included.
Right.
And I go back to what I said initially. I think a lot of this goes back to the inclusive education model, the fact that it is not working the way that it was intended to, and it has to be reformed.
This is a more philosophical question. When you and I were younger, there was a bus for us and there was a bus for them. We never saw people with these disabilities. They were taken off, basically warehoused. We had basically an apartheid kind of system for people with mental disabilities. I mean, it's shameful if you think about it. Governments across Canada at the time made this promise that in inclusive education, all of the resources for that warehousing would be shifted to the public system. And so I'm not blaming you or the Liberal government or Conservative government before you, but was there a violation of a promise there that somehow we were going to make this inclusive thing work, and the resources that were supposed to follow to make it work just never followed?
Well, look, I would go further than that. I mean, if you look at the decisions made by the Supreme Court of Canada in recent years, we actually have a legal obligation
That's right.
to provide inclusive education, to ensure people are included. So we have that obligation. We have a moral obligation. If we want to have inclusive communities, part of that is, children growing up with people with various special needs, and all of us are different. So being able to live with difference, appreciate difference, respect difference, rather than doing what we did here, say in St. John's or in the province years ago, which was having a human warehouse at Exxon House, right? So we don't want to go back there. But no, there's absolutely no doubt about that. I mean, we are challenged to provide inclusive education with the resources that we have and the model that we're trying to use. And I'm not blaming anyone, by the way. Our teachers work under exceptionally difficult circumstances. I think the people who came up with this model, the people who lobbied for this model, their hearts are all in the right place. I just think we really have to adjust things, change the way we are doing things. And I'm really hoping to work with the task force when they get to the end of the road, because they'll produce a report in June of this year.
Recommendations.
We'll work on an education action plan subsequent to that, and it's my hope that in the budget next year that we can start to put things together in a way that we can change the system for September 2018. I fully acknowledge that's sort of cold comfort for people right now who are looking for help.
Many of the teachers in the Side the Classroom series, from K to 12, painted pictures of being at their wits' end, that they felt burnt out. Did any of the series result in you saying, as minister, I've got to take action on this or that? Any specific issues that rose that you found were important?
Sure. It's interesting because as Minister of Education and Early Childhood Development, I've made it a priority to visit as many schools as I can, to talk to teachers one-on-one, to sort of be a fly on the wall if I can, insofar as I can, to see what's going on. A lot of the things that were mentioned in that series reminded me of the things that I'm seeing. I talk to principals, I talk to teachers about the problems that they have, and it's not all a revelation. And to be quite honest, I've been in office since 2011, and have been agitating for change since then. So there wasn't a whole lot of news. There's no doubt about it. But I don't dispute that there are significant challenges that we have to overcome, because otherwise we're failing our kids, and I don't want to be responsible for it.
Final question for you, Mr. Kirby, and that is, some teachers reluctantly spoke to us, others refused to because they feared repercussions. Do you or the English District have any intention of taking any disciplinary action against the teachers and educators who spoke to us?
Never. I have been very clear from the beginning that we need to hear from teachers. They're able to speak out publicly. There's no problem with that. I don't have any intention of suppressing you know, free speech or what have you. I think if this is Canada and we value the fact that we can have a respectful dialogue about what we need to do. And I've been pretty clear about that from the beginning.
Well, I'm grateful for our respectful dialogue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.